We are communities and peoples in the front lines of the climate and social crisis.
We suffer their enduring and irreversible environmental and social impact, rising seas, extreme flooding, water shortage, extinction of species, ecosystem collapse, food insecurity, displacement of tens of millions of people, and loss of lives.
Despite the gravity of the problem, climate ambitions of the world leaders remain woefully inadequate. Instead of reducing their emissions, historical polluters pump out even more carbon into the atmosphere. Governments and multilateral development banks continue financing coal and other fossil fuel plants in developing countries, locking out our economies and future into dirty and expensive energy sources.
Developed countries skirt culpability for their past, present, and future emissions by promising to achieve net zero or carbon neutrality by 2050. A deceptive language premised on canceling out emissions in the atmosphere through techno fixes, accounting tricks, and carbon markets, rather than eliminating their costs. The capitalist drive for growth, expansion, and profit.
Indeed, some of the proposals on the table not only distract us from the real plans and action that equitable and justly address the crisis we face, they also seek to further colonize our territories and resources while profiting off our vulnerability.
Projects such as forest conservation, renewable energy farms, and biofuel plantations in developing countries, created to give rich countries and their corporations pollution permits, are driving massive land grabbing and subsequently the displacement of our indigenous peoples, local communities, and forest dwellers. This is climate imperialism.
Developed countries are not providing their fair share of finance to help us cope with climate change. In fact, they could not even deliver the bare minimum of the climate finance promise they made more than a decade ago. Instead of settling their climate debt, developed countries are burying us deep in loans for projects that do not address the real needs of the most climate vulnerable.
Because developed countries are not fulfilling their responsibility, we now contend with the social, economic, environmental, and cultural impacts of climate change that are already beyond adaptation. For years, we have been calling for just compensation to deal with the damages to property and livelihood and loss of biodiversity, culture, community, and lives because of global warming. And yet, rich countries like the US and the UK that have built their wealth off fossil fuels are blocking efforts that would set in stone their liability and obligations.
Meanwhile, COVID-19 threatens to further deepen pre-existing problems of corporatized development, marginalization of people in the development process, and socio-economic inequalities. Economic recovery strategies, dubbed as the new normal, are increasingly unfolding to be the same policies that have led to the monopolization of natural resources, privatization of social wealth, and rising temperatures. In many instances, with the urging of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, important legislations and regulations to protect communities and the environment are reversed.
The crisis is only further aggravated with the erosion of people's democratic rights, such as our right to access to information, participation in the development process, and our right to organize and mobilize. We are enraged at how the UK government is using COP26 as a public relations stunt to greenwash its image and to posture as a global climate leader, despite failing to ensure the safe and democratic participation of parties, civil society, and the people's movements from the global south.
We face worsening repression, harassment, imprisonment, and killings at the hands of the state forces and big foreign corporations that want to capture our lands, rivers, mountains, forests, and other natural resources. We are communities and people in the front lines of the climate and social crisis, and we need nothing less than climate justice and system change.
We demand historic polluter implement immediate, rapid, and deep emissions cuts without the use of tech-fix and false solutions that violate our human rights, rural and indigenous communities. We demand an equitable and just fossil fuels pass out at a pace consistent with limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
We demand developed countries deliver their promise of $100 billion a year in new and additional public climate finance, while also committing to a new finance goal based on the actual needs of frontline communities.
We demand advanced capitalist countries to provide additional public finance and compensation to the most affected peoples and areas bearing the brunt and losses and damages from climate breakdown to help them recover and rebuild their lives.
We reject carbon markets and all other false solutions to climate change that led to the plunder of our resources by the global north countries and corporations. We reject imperialist trade pacts that empower polluters and prevent people's access to climate-friendly technologies and low-carbon alternatives.
We support climate solutions, protecting biodiversity and preserving ecological balance, while safeguarding food sovereignty and people's rights. Securing land and tenure rights for indigenous peoples, farmers, and local communities are important in achieving such goals. We advocate for community-owned and controlled renewable energy systems.
We demand the recognition and protection of the rights of land and environmental defenders as essential frontliners to the climate crisis. In solidarity with the broader sectors and movements working for system change, we call for a new economics for the people and planet, not profits.
We are communities and peoples in the front lines of the climate and social crisis. We vow to fight for these demands inside and outside of the official climate negotiations with the broad masses in Glasgow and across the world.
Climate justice now.
Climate justice now.
Climate justice now. People and planet over profit.
People and planet over profit.
End climate imperialism now!
End climate imperialism, people and planet over profit.